Melvin.
We will get started at the top of the hour.
Okay, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
Dig this, 3 Georgia boys. Wow.
I know. I was thinking that as well.
Homeboy. Okay, great.
Drew, I appreciate you doing this.
Oh man, thanks for the invite. You know I got you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I sent you a text too. Hit me back probably later on when you get a chance about July.
Okay, will do.
All right. Well, welcome back, everyone. We're going to continue on from the place where Upswing started, North Carolina, to the place where I started, Georgia. We've brought in 2 people from the Peach State, Dr. Adrian Haugabrook and Drew Ragland. Thank you all both for attending and for being part of this particular panel on re-engaging Black and minority male students. I wanted to first just start off by sharing that we did a version of this back in February, and it was one of our most well-received and well-attended panels. We had over 250 people register. We had so many questions coming in that we had to actually cut them off at the end because we were going over time. So I had to bring back Dr. Haugabrook here again to speak to us. And I'm also really excited to have with us here Drew Ragland. So I'm going to give just a little bit of a bio on both of you all, introducing to people who don't know you all yet. So Dr. Adrian Haugabrook is Executive Vice President and Managing Director of the Social Impact Collective at Southern New Hampshire University. He provides strategic leadership for the university's national and global investments and innovations that extend the university's mission. Adrian sits on several boards, including the Post-Secondary National Policy Institute and Complete College America. And I'll add in Upswing as well. I'm sure that was just a small omission there. He also has a doctorate from the University of Massachusetts, Boston, and a master's from Georgia Southwestern State University, and a bachelor's from University of West Georgia. So welcome, Adrian. Really great to have you here today.
No, thank you, Melvin. I thought that it was assumed that I was on the board for Upswing.
And then we also have Drew Ragland here. Drew is a 26-year veteran educator now pursuing his dream of ensuring that the world sees the potential, the genius, and the leadership of our children, and making our country better as a result. Over the course of his career, Ragland has traveled thousands of miles on college tours with his students and helped them win millions of dollars in scholarships. Andrew's former students have been accepted to Howard University, Morehouse, Duke University, and many others, and now his students are thriving at one of 5 Strong's 9 HBCU partners. Ragland founded 5 Strong after watching his students benefit from the Posse Foundation program. Their success inspired him to bring together bright students ready to grow and the institutions that could help them do it. He designed a program that would offer a shot to students that might not otherwise get it and would funnel the burgeoning talent to the special schools he knew would support them as much as he would. Ragland brings 7 years of teaching experience, 2 through Teach for America, and over 15 years of experience as a school counselor to his 5 Strong leadership. He earned his bachelor's in mass communications from the University of West Georgia, his teaching certification at Southern University of New Orleans, his education specialist degree in guidance and counseling from Troy University, and his master's degree in school counseling from Clark Atlanta University, which makes him a proud HBCU graduate himself. Welcome, Drew. It's so great to have you here as well.
Thank you, Melvin.
So before we kind of jump into the questions, I wanted to make sure that everyone knows that this is a very interactive session. We certainly want to allow for people to be able to ask the questions that they want to ask of these esteemed panelists. So we have our Q&A button here. You can click that Q&A button to go ahead and put in those questions at any point in time. And then we, of course, have our chat section here as well. We look forward to any sort of thoughts or questions that you all have. So I wanted to start off first, very similar to how we talked about the last time, which, oops, actually I forgot. These were the slides here. I forgot to click on those. I wanted to just kind of share a little bit about our the higher education enrollment trends that we've seen, specifically kind of pertaining to students of color. You know, for years, we've of course seen declining enrollment of men in higher education versus women. Today, Black men represent just 4.6% of those enrolled in college. And we're also seeing that Black men are 10% less likely to graduate than Black females. But we're also noticing is that particularly among HBCUs, we're noticing enrollments that have been increasing 57% nationally. And so it's with this backdrop that we're wanting to pose this question and have this conversation here today, because we're recognizing that there is certainly a strong need to find ways to ensure that we're seeing greater completion and success among students, male students of color, but we're also wanting to recognize what are some of the things that we're noticing that HBCUs have been contributing to contribute to that success as well. So I first just wanted to begin by just asking, you know, what are some of the specific resources and support systems that you all have found that are effective and not just providing ways to navigate success for first generation students, but also students of color? And what are things that we might be able to learn that we can help to guide along that pathway as well? And I'll start that off with you, Dr. Haugabrook.
Yeah, thank you. Again, Melvin, thank you. And I do recall the first time that we did this a few months ago, and the response was wonderful. And so I hope that we can rise to those expectations again. But I also want to sort of challenge all of us that are listening or participating in this, is that there's nothing that Drew and I can say that's going to, mitigate or eliminate all the sort of the negative trends that we're seeing around enrollment and success for Black men and men of color in general. So the hope here is that there's a very pragmatic view that we can take with this. And so I represent what we would call a very large scaled national, actually international university, with Southern New Hampshire University, with over 185,000 learners and students across all of our modalities. And so there's a particular point of view that I might share that may be similar to or very different than what Drew presents. But I think that there are a couple of things that we need to really assess as part of this challenge. One is, really thinking about not just access, but really reframing and talking about this in terms of pathways. And so we typically think of that sort of transaction or that transition from high school to college, but a lot of what we're seeing in and just put it in the context of the United States is that we're seeing more older students or older learners coming into the post-secondary pathway or into post-secondary higher education, as well as you mentioned, that we're seeing a sort of a decline in the enrollments coming in between high school and college. But I think there are still some very systemic issues and barriers that pose themselves as challenges. And one of those is that higher education, in many regards, is not always the first priority when you look at what's happening in our global and national economy now. And so as we began to think about how do you make the connection between when you look at the educational pathway and you start making the connections between what are the needs of learners, students, as they finish high school and go into post-secondary, they're also thinking about what are the career opportunities. And so I was just at a breakfast this morning. I'm actually in New Orleans for a set of meetings. I was at a breakfast this morning and we were talking about some of these very issues. And one of the things that we feel is somewhat deficit in the language between higher ed institutions, our K-12, and our employers are really focusing on what are the skills, knowledge, capabilities, competencies that are needed that really help to create those opportunities to engage in pathways that are able to satisfy a compilation of needs and not just getting the credential. And so one of the things that I will just sort of close with is, at least around this question, is how do we think about mitigating those systemic issues that really pose themselves as barriers? And you can look at it in terms of point solutions. You can look at it in terms of application solutions, much like the work that that we're all engaged in, be it from a technology perspective or from solving those problems. Or you can look at it from a systems or a systemic set of solutions that completely overhauls the approach and the strategies to really complex questions with complex strategies.
Thanks for that. I like how you've broken those down, those three pieces, and I definitely want to dive deeper into each one of those in particular, the systemic piece there. But I also wanted to give Drew, it looked like you were getting ready to jump in anyway. So I'd love to just hear some of your perspectives on this as well.
Well, I totally agree with Dr. Haugabrook stated just then, but as far as what Five Strong does when it comes to specific resources and support systems, just from my experience as a high school counselor and helping kids graduate from high school, get into college, and only to see several, especially young men, return home after 1 or 2 years of college and finding out that the reason they have returned is because they either lack the funding or they lack support or they lack both. Really helped put the fire inside of me to create Five Strong, because what we believe is kids, Black kids in general, especially Black males, need two things. They need funding and they need support. And included in that support is mentorship. We provide ongoing mentorship and support for our scholars throughout their college career. We also provide college-ready prep sessions to get them ready for those upcoming 4 years so they can be prepared for some of the experiences, positive and negative, they're going to be facing throughout those careers. So we definitely believe that support and funding will help, and it has been effective. We've been doing this since 2016, and we've proven that we target Black males and even young Black females that have pretty good grades, but they may not have the best test scores. And a lot of times we call those students that are in the academic middle. But those kids are often left out of scholarship opportunities because many scholarships, or most scholarships, are based on amazingly high test scores. But we have proven over the years that a kid without those amazingly high test scores, but students that show leadership, that show that have shown academic success throughout their high school career, can go to college, be successful, thrive, get great jobs after they graduate, and also even move on to graduate school, whether it's an HBCU or PWI. They can go on to graduate school and also be successful.
That's absolutely true. That just reminds me a little bit of my experiences as well. I, of course, as you know, grew up in Albany, Georgia. So certainly a majority minority community. And that was sort of my viewpoint, right, of what it took to kind of, get to and through college, et cetera. When I went to the University of Georgia, I remember we kind of infamously had a group there called the 1.9%, because that was what percentage of the entire population was made up of Black males. You really began to recognize just how that lack of support or lack of feeling like you belonged impacted you. There were the resources that were there. There's a financial aid office, there's a writing center, those types of things. But I remember just the feeling of not wanting to be that person, right? That student to be seen walking into those buildings. For one, being the only, being one of the only Black men that I saw, to show that I needed help was a problem. And then for two, being from South Georgia, where, there's already a stigma there, also showing that that's the exact same need. So I'd love to just kind of hear what are some of the ways in which, your organization, Five Strong, is helping through mentorship guidance to really kind of help to boost the esteem, the kind of stick-to-itiveness, the needs that it takes to provide that mentorship and show those students that they do have a pathway towards success.
Well, after our students are selected, and they actually go through an intensive 3-round interview process before they're selected, they have to attend mandatory college-ready prep sessions. And these prep sessions are mostly led by a variety of presenters, many of who are HBCU alumni. But those sessions cover topics like balancing academics and social life, dealing with mental health, building relationships with your professors and advisors, learning about and taking advantage of the on-campus resources, because even though the resources are there, a lot of kids either don't know about them when they get there, or like you said, they may be hesitant to go get that assistance. But we provide information and support as far as what to do when you, all different types of situations these kids may experience throughout college. We try to cover those topics. We do this twice a month from February to May. And like I said, these are mandatory sessions. And we also take them to visit the college campus so they can meet key personnel on campus, so they can meet the current scholars from 5 Strong that are already on campus. And they will already have a family when they get there, as opposed to being that person on campus that knows nobody. And your first job is to hope to try to make friends. So our kids will go in a cohort, first of all, of 5, maybe 10. When they get there, they'll be in that freshman cohort. But when they get there, there's a strong chance that there'll also be cohorts of sophomores, juniors, and seniors, depending on how long we've had a partnership with that HBCU. So they arrive with a built-in family of support, so people they can go to for any type of issues or concerns there. Plus, they have the 5 Strong staff that they can lean on for any type of support, because we're available to our scholars pretty much 24/7 via text, via email. And we've also partnered with another organization called Beyond 12, which allows our kids to have a college coach. They have meetings with this college coach once or twice a month throughout their first 2 years of college.
Yeah,
I love that.
Yeah. And I'd love to add to that, and I follow the work that that Drew and 5 Strong has done, and it's phenomenal work. And one of the things that Drew just highlighted, that's an important part of some of the work that we're doing at SNHU, is really vesting the work, particularly the sense of belonging and the affinity work, within the community context in which the learner or the student lives, resides, or works. And you can't discount that and really have to see that as an asset. And so the way that we facilitate that is through a number of ways. It could be through dual enrollment. And so when you think about the aspects of dual enrollment, most people, or at least in the initial build of dual enrollment, it was, again, to Drew's point, it was for those kids who were succeeding well, and it was like, hey, here's an incentive for you to continue to do even more. Now we've reframed that, and I've seen a lot of work happening in high schools around the country, in some of the work that we're doing as well, where they're seeing this as that place and space through a community of care, through, sense of belonging, affinity, and all those other, where you actually build those skill sets through the dual enrollment, so that when that learner graduates from high school, they are saddled with all kinds of skills, abilities, confidences to move into a setting where they don't have to see themselves as, well, I'm just from South Georgia, so so I think that's one part of it. The other part that I really love about this is that, again, within the context of the community, you begin to see the assets in the community versus seeing it as a deficit. And so, we love using terms, well, I'm using this in sort of a pejorative way. We love using terms of underserved youth or underserved communities, or, disadvantaged or what have you. And that comes from a particular point of view, and that's not the viewpoint of those who are living in community. And so when you do this very kind of work, when you do the 5 Strong work, when you do the community partners work that we do with Southern New Hampshire University, you actually are a participant in community, and community sets the context, community defines the assets, and then from there is how you build upon that student experience and how you build upon that college access, the post-secondary access pathways, and success as well, because those skill sets travel with that student.
Great point. Dr. Haugabrook. I was about to call you Adrian, which I'm used to calling you. Great point
That's
bringing up
completely fine.
Great point bringing up dual enrollment also, because one of our other goals is to help our kids graduate with zero to minimal student loan debt, because we also want to help close the racial wealth gap. And we do know that if kids graduate without those looming enormous amount of student loans that they may end up carrying for 15 to 20 years, if they can graduate without that burden, they can pursue they can move forward with building wealth and doing things like, buying a house instead of having to pay on that student loan, or buying property, or different, participating in stocks and bonds and things like that. But dual enrollment helps us with that also, because now that we are able to recruit quite a few kids that complete numerous amounts of courses in dual enrollment before they get to college, we are finding kids that our kids are graduating in not 4 years, but sometimes 3.5, sometimes 3 years. And that eliminates them from accumulating that large amount of debt, because they're able to get out of school pretty quickly now. So dual enrollment has been a major factor.
Yeah, as someone who finally just paid off his student loans last year, I completely recognize the benefit of that. That is really amazing to hear. I actually have a question for you, Drew, along those lines. So, we just heard from Ken Briggs, who was talking about really trying to help students to be able to see the value of education, despite the cost, right? Obviously, there has to be an equation to lowering that cost, and it sounds like those are some of the things that dual enrollment programs and scholarships and things like that are able to do. But how do you find ways to help some of these students who are probably, I assume they must be thinking about college, but also thinking about maybe other options that are faster ways to start generating money. How do you just convince them and continue to motivate them to want to see this through all the way to that graduation and diploma point?
That's a great question. That's a very good question. And our thing is, from the time we recruit our scholars, we just totally emphasize the goal of, first of all, just being able to graduate with the zero to minimum student loan debt, but also to immediately start targeting on their career goals. And we do have partnerships with a variety of business partners that allow our scholars to get mentors, specifically mentors in their field of a profession, so that they can continue to keep an eye on the prize and see if that's really what they want to do. We also push them to start getting internships after their freshman year, so they can get a great idea of if that profession is something they want to do, if they need to change majors, or if they're on target for what they want to do. So between campus involvement, between pushing internships, actually helping them find summer jobs, there are a lot of different things that we do to just help them keep their eye on the prize and to stay focused on understanding that education will be a definite educational degree will be a major benefit for them from now throughout their future.
Yeah, and I remember Dr. Haugabrook, we talked about this last time as well, that's one of the big things that you wanted to do for your students as well at Southern New Hampshire. Can you just share a little bit about some of the ways in which you're trying to continue to just motivate students to get to that finish line and not see, perhaps taking, a year off or multiple years off as being the better kind of short-term option?
Yeah. So for us at Southern New Hampshire, we have at least 3 different modalities. And so those modalities, which are defined in terms of academic delivery, really present students with a choice. And so one modality, which is our largest, is the online. So everyone is seeing SNHU commercials all across the country and also into U.S. territories because the flexibility that comes with that really affords people the opportunity to do it from wherever they are and when they can do it. And so that's one, and that creates a price point because we're such a large institution where we've not had to raise tuition in 15 years or so.
Oh, wow.
And so for us, this notion of affordability is not just what does affordability what is affordable according to the national benchmarks. We're really listening and actively engaging in our learner experience to better understand what truly affordability means to the learner. So we also have a traditional kind of bucolic New England campus, a residential campus. So that creates another option. And then we have another modality in terms of the competency-based education model, which is really based on the assessment of skills. And so in that regard, the skills or the assessment of those skills. So it's not just what you know, but it's what you know how to do and can demonstrate that. That becomes agnostic as to, did you learn, financial management, being a shop manager or a store floor manager at Walmart, or if you learn how to do the books because you did a little side deal, a little side hustle, on the corner someplace. And so that then becomes a way to assess skills and competencies in a way that is not only affordable, but it costs nearly, it doesn't cost much at all, because it's more based on prior learning and receiving credit for prior learning in that regard. And so we're constantly looking at and modulating and moderating around that experience. And then the other piece that we do as well is to very similarly to what Five Strong does, and what Five Strong does with its higher education partners, is really provide those wraparound supports to the learners, so that learners have an opportunity to not only they actually begin to create a sense of their own agency in their educational pathway. And so, for example, in this competency-based model approach that we've talked about, you can accumulate as many competencies as you can in a period of time. And so what does that mean? It means that now I have choice. If I know that I'm a parent or I'm a caring adult, taking care of someone, and I know that this upcoming season, let's just say summer, is going to be an intense season in terms of care, and I can ramp up with as many competencies and credits as I can, and then I can ramp down because it's based on a subscription model. And so those are the kinds of things that that really help to continue the motivation, continue the propulsion of learners through their journey, and to the point that was made earlier, just again, using the CBE model as our example, we're seeing students graduate with their AA degrees in a little less than a year, and actually completing their BA degrees in about 1.5, 1.8 years. So it's, and these are Black and brown learners throughout the country. And actually, we're doing this very work in 5 countries in Africa and also in the Middle East.
That's really amazing, because not just because it's allowing people to get out into the workforce more quickly, where they can start to see the return on investment, but also because, as we've of course seen internally here at Upswing, and I'm sure you all have seen as well, there's a good percentage, around 25 to 30% of students in some cases, who are stopping out because of a circumstance that happens in their lives. And so if we can get them to the credentials sooner, the likelihood that they will have to stop out and quit also decreases significantly as well. I certainly wanted to touch on a bit more of those wraparound supports, and maybe options that you all would ask some of our panel participants to be able to think about, who might not necessarily have as much of some of the resources of, say, a Southern New Hampshire University. But before I jump to that question, I saw that we had a question from the audience, which was, they said, may I ask if there are programs like Five Strong for colleges that are not part of HBCUs? And I see, Drew, you mentioned the Posse Foundation, but are there any others that you all could potentially be able to share to our audience?
Right now, the Posse Foundation is the only program that I can think of. We kind of modeled our program after theirs. They actually partner with a large group of PWIs, and they send cohorts of 10 students to those schools on full tuition scholarships. Whereas partner with right now, and I know you mentioned 9 at the beginning during the bio, but we have 14 HBCU partners now. And we're named Five Strong because we were only asking the HBCUs for 5 full tuition scholarships, because we know getting 10 may not be as easy as yeah. We started with 5, hence the name came Five Strong. And but it's the same concept, and Posse actually has quite a few partners throughout the country, West Coast, East Coast, everywhere. So that's an organization that I would definitely look into if they're interested in doing something similar, sending kids in a cohort, or as they would say, a posse, together, with the goal being going, staying, and graduating together.
Awesome. If Simone, maybe you can provide that URL in the chat just so people can click on that. That'd be great.
Absolutely.
Melvin, to that question, we're talking a lot about the bachelor degree granting institutions, or the 4-year institutions. Again, listening to the first speaker, we cannot underestimate the power of our community colleges as well. And so some of the most innovative work that's actually happening with building, these pathways, and really thinking deeply and more intentionally, not necessarily more, but as intentionally, about pathways for African-American males and other students of color are happening with community colleges, partnering with their school districts, partnering with employers as well. And so I mentioned that because one of the earlier questions, both Drew and I talked about creating access into post-secondary,
Right.
particularly with from K to 12, or at least in the secondary space. So again, the engagement with our community colleges and technical institutions are a great through way to really help build those capacities and build those pathways.
Yeah, that's actually a good segue, because I did want to talk a little bit about how perhaps post-secondary institutions, in particular community colleges, can really think about ways to build upon that wraparound support model. There's obviously a lot that's already happening, but I would certainly love to just hear maybe some of your thoughts. I know some of the things that we've seen during the pandemic. So for example, at the very beginning stages of the pandemic, which is pretty prevalent now, but we started, through our virtual assistant Anna, started initially seeing these messages come through with students that were struggling with isolationism, struggling with anxiety over what does this thing even do, what might this mean for my family? And then of course many people who were frontline workers who suddenly had lost their jobs. One of the ways in which we really tried to provide levels of support and help was to before we had our own mental health platform, was to find ways that we could connect them in to maybe virtual services, to services that that could help to just cascade the overload that was coming in through some of these colleges. I'm just wondering, are there kind of ways in which you all have found that are innovative, but maybe also cost-effective approaches that colleges can take to heart as well? I know that one of the things you mentioned earlier on was working within the community to be able to do those things. Could you just kind of expound upon that a little bit?
Sure. So again, using this community-based approach that I talked about earlier is one potential approach. I think the other piece is, so imagine, an institution is partnering with an organization very similar to Five Strong. It may not be solely focused on college going or college access, college readiness, but it has the capabilities for some of the services that we've been talking about before, or it has access to technologies that students can begin engaging with to better understand how not only to translate that into college access, but also it helps them to think about the return on their investment. There was a question in the that I saw just a little bit earlier where, how do you work with students who are, in the phrase that the person used was, misguided by the cost of tuition, and really see that in terms of a return on investment. And so how do you begin to, again, from a contextual perspective, how do you begin to address the issues and the challenges that often come up with students, learners, families, and communities that your institution is serving, how do you begin addressing those issues earlier in the process so that by the time you get to those opportunities for post-secondary, you have confirmed answers and responses to that. So there are a number of programs. There's a range all across the country of college readiness work or college access work, college readiness organizations. How do you begin to partner with those organizations in a way that really helps to build that community as an information resource, and not just as, well, you won't hear about it until you apply. And so really thinking more intentionally about programmatic efforts and partnerships and collaborations, including workforce opportunities as well, workforce organizations as a way to help build the capacity within community.
And it also, Dr. Haugabrook, we actually one of the next phases of Five Strong is to actually partner with some local community colleges and get those young men that complete their associate's degree in 2 years, and try to find some of our HBCU partners that are offering four-year full tuition scholarships to provide 2-year full tuition scholarships to these students, so they can roll right out of the community college, become a part of a support program, get funding to help them for those next 2 years, and also support also. So, but in regards to what you were asking earlier, Melvin, we work hard to try to partner with our local high schools, especially the key personnel like the college access advisors and even the counselors, to help them try to identify those young men who say, you know what, you can really benefit from Five Strong, or you can really benefit from this program. Because, you know, we can send out applications and links and different things like that, and go to different college fairs and have kids apply. But it's something different when your counselor or your college advisor sits you down and lets you know this program it can benefit you, because they've already identified that this student could use that type of support. And a lot of times those kids from high school, they need that push. They need somebody to guide them and advise them on which direction they should go, or what's going to be most beneficial for them. And so that's helpful for us also, because that helps us get the right type of kids that fit our program, that are ready to be a part of a support program, participate in a support program, work with other kids, and move towards graduation.
You know,
I love that.
Melvin, I just add one more thing to what Drew was mentioning. So again, one of the one of the big pluses in working with community colleges or other institutions like them is that the most often the community colleges will have transfer articulation agreements with the four-year institutions in their states. And so one of the things that I saw very early on in the dual enrollment scheme was that a lot of the, you would get credit for doing the dual enrollment course, but that course wasn't always transferable. And so now institutions and organizations like Five Strong are doing a much better job with ensuring that the articulation, or that the way that these credits can transfer to another institution within that system, that's where you really begin seeing the diminishing, not the diminishing of the credit, but the diminishing of the cost. So that now you're really seeing the transferability. It makes no sense to complete, let's say, 20 credits in a dual enrollment program, and you go to apply to another institution, to a college, and they're like, well, only 6 of these credits will count towards your degree.
Right.
Yeah, that's definitely an amazing point right there. I know I spoke recently to one of our college admins who that was one of the things that they were struggling with, and because of that, we're really pushing students to complete the AA degree, so that if the credits wouldn't count, at least the AA degree would count. And of course, that meant more time for the student as well. So those articulation agreements and understanding, how they will absolutely transfer to the 4 years is of course key as well.
Very.
I see that we've got a quite a list of questions coming in, which is amazing. So I'm gonna do a bit of a rapid fire for you all here. First one comes from Worst Downing that says, Mr. Ragland, how can we reach you?
Okay, I'll make sure my information is put in the chat. I think it should be already available. Elena should have it. If not, I'll put it in there also.
Yeah, we'll make sure that all that information gets disseminated. So we'll make sure everyone has that. Thanks so much for that one. And then the next question from Melissa Dayton says, I'm hearing the importance of creating a group of people that you know going in and try to graduate with. How does this work when some students move through programs faster than others?
Well, that's an interesting question, but the fact of the matter is that there are still numerous amounts of students from different cohorts already on campus. So, and students will move faster than others. But there will still be students available to assist or support along with us also to support that student who is not moving as fast as most kids. But our goal is for our kids to graduate in 4 years because the scholarship ends in 4 years. Now, but because of programs like dual enrollment, we've had kids graduate as soon as 2.5 years, 3 years, and 3.5 years. So as they continue to move on, we still continue to make sure we wrap around those kids that are still on campus if they still need support from us, or if then they still have other cohort members on campus to continue to reach out and connect to, along with the on-campus staff that can support them.
Yeah, you know, I was actually part of one of those cohorts as well. It didn't start when I first began, but I kind of joined midway through college. And one thing that I remember was that they had not just the cohort that you were with, but also an alumni program, if you will. I'm not sure if this is something that Five Strong has thought about, but I think that having that opportunity for students to see others who have graduated and, you know, were part of that program, I think also gives a little bit of that lens towards, okay, I can make it to tomorrow. I might not be able to see 2 years from now, but I can certainly make it through to tomorrow because this person, you know, made it. So I wholeheartedly co-sign on the cohort initiative.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. And we actually bring in alumni that have graduated or some that are currently on campus to do panel discussions for our newly selected scholars. Because you know, sometimes they get tired of hearing from the adults, and plus, you know, they know more than us anyway. But to hear from their peers and to hear the real stories and the truth about what happens on campus and what the different experiences they're going to be experiencing, to hear that from their peers, they take that in, and we have to shut the meeting down because the questions keep coming about the different experiences from those scholars.
Yeah. We have another question. So we recently discussed partnering with community businesses and larger companies. This is actually something, Adrian, you had touched on, but sometimes colleges overlook the minority businesses and connecting Black students with local Black businesses. What strategies can we implement to fix this?
So one of the things that I am beginning to see is I'm seeing in more companies and more institutions understanding this community context that we're talking about. So it's less of a strategy as it is a tactic. It's making these businesses known to the institution. For, you know, these are the communities in which the students are coming. Then making that connection with, you know, these are the assets in the community. I think there are a number of ways from an institutional perspective that this can be done. So thinking about, where's the office that's doing community outreach in public relations? So how are they doing the scan of community to understand what's there? If you have corporate development, fundraising, they're going to have a sense of what's there or need to know more about what's there. So being able to gather that information. And then I think another way of doing that is again, through personas and profiles of your learners, of your students, to understand where do they see the assets in their community? And those are, I mean, it could be as simple as focus groups to better understand how they connect with those businesses or companies, as you said, the minority-owned businesses, and what possibilities or opportunities do they see with that? The other area is career services. If you have career services, which almost every campus does, again, what is the scan that they've done for businesses and employers that are Black owned or minority owned?
Yeah, I love that. And certainly if there are ways to create more of those outreaches, to make it easier on those businesses, I think that helps a lot as well. But I think part of the draw and the lure is that with the larger businesses, they have the resources and the, huge, HR departments and things like that to be able to create programs and go at the colleges, but some of the smaller ones, might not necessarily have that at their disposal. They're certainly still wanting and willing to help to provide that support, but a little bit of kind of the outreach certainly goes a long way, I think, as well, within those types of resources and confines as well. Definitely kind of a handshake type thing that's taking place there, for sure. And then we have one last question in the chat currently, which is, how can you engage Black male athletes? Their schedules are rigid. This one's Dr. Haugabrook, I know you had to deal with growing up. But their schedules are rigid, so it can be difficult for them to participate in extracurricular activities and attend support activities. I've thought about this a pretty good bit, particularly because I've been really enthralled by the Netflix show Last Chance U. And obviously being someone who works within higher ed, it's something that I think about a lot, which is just, man, there's just so much that's pulling at your time and your resources. And, it's hard to be an athlete and a student, let alone a student athlete. I'd love to just have you share a little bit of your experiences, as well as talk about what are ways in which we can help make things a little bit easier for them.
Yeah. So let me answer the latter part first, and then I'll, if time permitting, I'll talk about my own experiences. So I love Last Chance U as well, and I watch it like I get visceral with it because that was my experience in college. But let me go to one of the questions that we didn't get a chance to really talk about was technology, and so how do you think about the utilization of technology as a source? And so the question, I love the question because it started out with, how do you engage? But then it went on to say, because they can't attend. And so I think part of this is reframing how we think about engagement. And engagement isn't always about attendance. And so when I go back to my college playing days, during the season, during football season, I was spending almost 40 hours per week with football related things, practice, travel, games. And then in the off season, it was about 25 hours a week. And so getting someone like me to attend was probably going to be a challenge. But when you reframe engagement, that's when you begin to understand what are the networks and supports that student athletes are in or have access to, and then how do you engage in that way? And so instead of thinking about it as, Adrian didn't show up for the XYZ session that we put on, what are the ways that we can use technology as a way to actually drive the outcomes that we're looking for? So for example, Upswing has Anna. How do you utilize a tool like Anna, a prompt device that actually engages with learners at any time and place? And it's a mobile device. It's utilizing your mobile device. What role can your SIS systems play in helping to engage, or Salesforce or what have you? How do you utilize those technologies and tools as a way to engage? And then also thinking about how you take feedback from the student athlete about what resources, what time, what capabilities he or she has, or them may have in their learning journey. And so let's be careful. And I know this wasn't the way that the question was answered or asked, but let's be careful that we're not putting our subjective view of what a student athlete is, and then saying, well, this is what we've set up and we can't utilize that. What are the role of coaches? And not all of us are, elite D1, athletes. In my own mind, I am, but we we may not necessarily be. And so many of those student athletes that we're talking about, like 90 some odd percent of them are folks who are really doing learning and athletics, and they're balancing a whole host of things. And so really understanding that that those student athletes could be Drew, could be Melvin, could be me, could be any of us. And so how do you utilize technology, networks, and other capacity building structures to support student athletes?
I love that. I love that. And such a great way to end this. I think that giving a little bit of light into how technology can help to expand the type of ways in which we're creating wraparound services is certainly really key there. I saw one message come in from Worst Downing saying, I'm thankful for this session since I'm conducting my dissertation research study on first generation Black college men who are part of a college access or pre-college program. So I think that just like Worst said, this certainly has been a really enlightening just panel and presentation. And I really appreciate you, Dr. Haugabrook, for being able to come back and just lend a little bit more light, as well as you, Drew, for being able to share just the work that you've done with 5 Strong, the reason why what you're doing is so impactful in the ways in which our audience can use some of those resources to support their students as well. So thank you all both for your time today. And yeah, we look forward to continuing the discussion.
Thank you. Pleasure being here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Well, we're